Hey guys, welcome back. I've got a special guest, Brenn Hill. How you doing, Brenn?
I'm doing great, man.
All right, Brent's got an interesting story. We met in Vietnam. He was living in Da Nang. I was living in Da Nang at the time, and then Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City, and then he's I guess tech entrepreneur or doing some stuff in that field, and now he's living in Germany. So we're gonna hear all about his journey and his thoughts on living abroad, et cetera, et cetera. So Brenn, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be on here.
Yeah. Okay. Let's first start off like your home state, hometown. Where'd you grow up?
Well, I actually was born in California, but I grew up in North Carolina,
Okay.
Greensboro. Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you go, did you have a typical American upbringing? Went to high school, played
Oh, I
sports, or
mean, yeah, but I wouldn't call it typical, but that would get way outside of this. It's kind of a Quentin Tarantino movie.
okay, no worries.
Non-existent. So,
Okay, no worries there. All right. So at that time, what were you interested? Like, did you think you were going to be like a certain, whatever, kids dream of being a professional career, or did you think in tech, or what
yeah,
were
I
you
mean,
thinking?
originally I was really interested in film. My dad owned a video store, and I actually did go to film school for
Oh,
a year.
okay.
And I mean, there's stuff I really liked about it, but they actually sat you down at the beginning and they were like, filmmaking is a disease. This is
Ah,
actually what they tell you. Like, they really try to impact you. They say, filmmaking is a disease. If you have the disease, you're going to be miserable, but you can't imagine doing anything else with your life, so you have to make movies. If you don't have the disease, you're going to be miserable and you're going to leave. Right?
ah.
Because it's just a miserable life. That's what they're, and I don't know if that's really true, but it is a life, right? Like you don't make movies like you have a 9 to 5 job. If you're in the filmmaking industry, that is your life, right?
I
Because you might
see.
be on set for like months in some foreign country or whatever, and working 20-hour days or whoever knows. So the part of the school was to just see if you wanted to work in that industry. And while I loved making movies, I didn't really want that to be my existence. So after a year, I was like, okay, this is cool. I'm learning a lot, but that's not what I want to do. And I had no idea what I want to do instead. So I just transferred schools. I said, cool, thanks. This was very helpful. And I didn't know it, but that 1 year of film school and the training they gave me, which was really good, opened up a lot of doors later in life that I never planned on.
Is that right? Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so went off to college for film. After a year, decided that wasn't for you. What did you
hmm
transition to?
I ended up getting a degree in psychology, which I found out near the end of that was completely useless. And then got this terrible, I mean, the people were nice, but it was this night job, wiring electrodes to people's heads to like
Oh,
study them while they sleep. And after a year or so of that, I went back to grad school, and that's where the filmmaking stuff kicked in because I went to this grad school, and Google had just bought YouTube, and they went to that grad school, and they were looking for a graduate assistant to work on all this research for YouTube, and I had this film background, and so I was the guy, right? And so Google YouTube paid for a lot of my grad school because I'd gone to film school,
wow.
of all things.
No way.
Completely random. And it's continued to open up doors for me in my life in different ways just because it was a really good film school and I learned a whole lot about media production and advertising and just, all the things that would go into it. You don't think it's connected to advertising, but media production, when I would work at ad agencies, like as a programmer later, the fact that I actually knew what it took to shoot films and stuff, because later we'd put them on the web or whatever, was helpful.
All right, so you had to start off in film, and then you
hmm
said is it psychology,
Yep.
and then you kind of combined the two, and then kind of had a string of success there. And then what did
Yeah.
it morph into after that?
Well, when I went back to grad school, it was for information science. So
Oh, you
that's
went
how I
back
got
to
my
grad school now.
Yeah, I went to grad school. So I got my undergrad in psychology, but then I went
Okay,
back to grad school, and
okay.
that's how Google and ended up paying for a lot of it. And then I got out and I just had I mean, I got out right when the Great Recession hit, and I was just lucky to get any job. And I got it, my first couple jobs were kind of lame, but it gave me time to get some experience. And then started working in different agencies. So like development agencies, but really with an advertising, marketing, media focus, because I had that background, right? So I wasn't yet that strong a programmer, but the fact that I had all these other skills was actually really useful to them. So like one of my first really good programming jobs, they would hand me something and say, "Can you animate this?" And I'd be like, "Of course I can animate it," because I knew how to do that stuff. That I knew about keyframe. I just knew all this background knowledge about media that really helped. And so for a long time in my career, I worked at media-oriented tech companies, and that really made my career take off. I ended up doing stuff for NASCAR and PGA Tour and Chelsea football and all sorts of cool stuff.
This is all in
So
North Carolina.
it started out in North Carolina, and then I ended up working for this company. It's gone now, called Omnigon, where I got to work completely remote, and that's how I ended up in Vietnam. So I traveled the U.S. working remotely as a lead engineer. Rode my motorcycle. I had a Harley at the time. Rode my Harley across the country from North Carolina to San Francisco, and then just kind of kept like upping the ante there. So then I went to Ukraine for a few months because they had an office there. But earlier I had gone to Vietnam and I had met my now wife, and so I ended up moving from there after a few months to Vietnam after I kind of negotiated that with the same gig. And that's how I ended up in Vietnam for years.
So what
I
year was this about when you discovered Vietnam, so to speak?
like 2015.
2015. Okay, so then that was your first time abroad, maybe?
No, I'd been building up to it. I'd gone to Mexico and I had gone to South Korea. I had a friend who'd moved to South Korea. I visited him for a few weeks, and then I'd gone to Mexico for a few weeks to visit a friend. I think I'd been to the Philippines once for about a month. Um, I was planning to leave the U.S. I was never really a fan of living there. I just didn't really know where I was going to go or how I was going to stay there. And then I ended up taking my dad to Vietnam because he met a woman online. I hadn't originally even thought of Vietnam, and I went there to get him married, and I ended up engaged on the same trip. So
What a story.
so it was really crazy. Yeah, I'm now married to this. She was a waitress at our hotel. I really liked her. I talked to her, and I moved out of the hotel just so I could ask her out,
No
and we started
way.
dating. Yeah, and it's been almost 10 years now. I mean, she was awesome. We really hit it off for like hard,
I
and went on
forgot
a
her
bunch of
name.
crazy.
I met her eventually.
Lynn,
Lynn.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, I did met her at one of
Yeah, we went
the.
on some crazy adventures while I was there, and then I moved back be with her, but also ended up taking care of my dad in Vietnam, and that's how I ended up with the coffee shop and all this other stuff. I mean, it
Ah,
completely took my life for a turn. So
what an incredible story. I had no idea about any of this.
yeah,
I just thought, you had the girlfriend slash wife. I knew about that part. And then when I was
no,
living in Da
no.
Nang, I heard about this cafe, and I didn't get it because it was like 6 on 6. So I'm like, what the heck is that? And it had high reviews. Everyone was going there. I didn't know anything
Yep.
about it. And, I just see it in the expat forums and
I just
et cetera, et
did
cetera.
you go to the original location where we had like the koi pond and
Oh,
the
wow.
waterfall and all that stuff?
No.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Oh well.
So tell us a little bit. Okay, so then you go to Vietnam, you
Hmm.
eventually marry, and then you have a wife, and then you have your dad there. He's got a Vietnamese wife, and then you guys decide on Da Nang. And we should tell the audience a little bit about Da Nang. What's it like? Where is it located?
Well, I mean, we should talk about how I ended up in Da Nang
Okay,
because
let's go there.
so when I moved to Vietnam and I was with my wife, we weren't sure where we wanted to land, so we actually ended up moving for I was still working remotely this job, but I was doing like entrepreneurial stuff on the side.
Okay.
Sadly, none of which got me rich. Doing crypto, I mean, always made money, but I didn't like really blow up.
Okay.
And we had moved to Cambodia and then Thailand. We had a friend who wanted to invest in my wife doing some sort of food and beverage operation because she was really good at it. So, and they were based in Thailand. We decided against Thailand because it was just oversaturated and neither of us are Thai. And we ended up checking out Da Nang, and that's where we found 6 on 6, where the prior owners were trying to sell it. They were struggling, they were barely breaking even, and they just wanted to go back. There's this American couple. And I really liked the cafe. My wife really liked the cafe, so we cut a deal. I paid for it. I just sent them the money with PayPal. It wasn't that much money. And then my wife just went to work just transforming this thing into a food and beverage powerhouse. And I already had good reviews, but like we took it from like breaking even to like really cashing in a lot of money.
And this is like what,
Um,
2018, 2019?
Yeah, this is like 2018,
Yeah.
2019,
Yep.
because 2020 we sold it right before COVID. We sold
Oh,
it.
wow.
Yeah, like
Dodged a
months
bow.
before COVID. I think
Huge bullet.
we got our final payment from the new owners in February, and of course, like the hammer came
Oh
down in
my
March.
gosh. That is, you can't dream of.
And I felt really bad for a while for the guy who bought it from me, but it turned out like he was an executive chef in Da Nang, and he
Oh.
all of his other gigs dried up. But we had such a strong clientele in the city that even though we lost the tourists, it was about 50-50 tourist and 50-50 local, right? You know, and it was enough for him to survive. He had to let go a lot of staff, and he had to run it. But if he hadn't bought it, he would have had nothing. Like there would have
Wow.
been nothing there. Um, as far as I can tell. So, you know, it ended up working out indirectly for everybody, and it's still there, and he's still running it, and apparently it's doing well. So once COVID went away, it picked back up. So,
Okay. And
yeah.
it was a cafe and bakery, I believe, or pastry or something like that, or.
Yeah, we did food. We did a little bit of baked goods. We had the best coffee in Vietnam. Our barista Ha won the All Vietnam Barista
Oh
Championship.
my God. Is that
Yeah, I
right?
mean, our coffee was good. Like
Okay.
I can say very objectively, our
All
coffee
right.
was incredibly good.
Okay.
I've only found one other place that I think has as good coffee as us, and it's in Hanoi. It's a Dream Bean Coffee, I think it's called. And I just stumbled upon it, and they do roasting on site, but they're very dedicated. But that's the only place.
All right. And then all I know is I arrived in Saigon
Hmm.
like January, February of 2019. And then
Yeah.
before you know it, after 6 months or hanging out at events, then I started to see you arrive in town. Or I don't know how that happened, but I just ran into you, I guess. So that's how that happened.
Yeah, I mean, we for a while, my wife and I were flying back and forth to Da Nang, and my schedule was really crazy. But yeah.
Okay, so then why did you decide on Ho Chi Minh City? Just because you guys were done with the dang or sold the business? And
A couple reasons. So I was kind of done. I mean, we wanted to get out of Da Nang because it's just boring to live there. I mean, some people love it. Don't get me wrong. Depends on what you want to do. But we were kind of bored, and it kept us locked down. And I got a job offer to go be CTO of this multi-million dollar startup in
wow.
Saigon. But sadly, we died with COVID. But
Oh,
otherwise, I would again be filthy rich.
wow.
So like, yeah, it was kind of that was unfortunate because it was actually doing really well. We grew like 40% the year before.
Uh-huh.
It was, yeah, oh well.
And,
And then COVID hit, and so we stayed in Vietnam because like, where were you going to go,
yeah,
right? Everything was on fire on the whole planet, and actually Vietnam was a good place to be.
right.
And so I kept working there, and I ended up working for VNG, which is Vietnam's first unicorn, so their first multi-billion dollar tech startup there as well.
Yes.
So that was pretty good. That was what I was doing in Vietnam, and then VNG came to an end. A couple reasons for that. One is it was in fintech, and fintech crashed, and also the Vietnamese government got a little bit more, let's say, just more unhappy with all the foreign influence that was there. They weren't really happy with that. So there's a lot of news. We were supposed to go public on Nasdaq, and that got blocked by the Vietnamese government.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, you can look that up on Google. And so that was also when I just kind of decided that I wanted. It took me a while. It was like a couple months after that had happened, where before I came really certain. Like once I had gotten the news, and they gave me time to find something else. But once it was really clear that's what's happening and why, I just said, you know what, I'm just kind of sick of Vietnam. I'd been there off and on for like 8 years, and I'd had a couple times where I almost got super rich and then had things blow up for like no reason.
Oh,
And the tech industry was being crazy, and I was like, you know what, my wife and I, we had briefly lived in Ukraine for in the middle of all this crazy stuff.
oh,
This is
okay.
one story. My wife had always liked Europe, and we'd always talked about moving to Europe. And I said, you know what, if this is coming to an end, let's just see what else is out there. So we looked at Europe, we looked at Hong Kong, we looked at Thailand. We actually almost moved to Hong Kong,
Wow.
but in the end, my wife was not a fan of the political repression going on there.
Yeah.
We were there for a couple weeks, and it felt like every other day people warned us about the autocratic government and how they would arrest us. And we were just like, after a while, it's just like, this is a really creepy vibe. That every other time we meet someone, they warn us about the government. Because it's an amazing city. I loved the city,
Yeah.
and you can make a lot of money there, but like, whatever. Like, so we were like, okay, maybe this is not stable, and maybe World War III will break out between U.S. and America, and we would be front row center for that. And you know, so maybe not here. So we finally made the decision not to go there, and I had an offer in Germany, and we said, without really knowing what was waiting for us in Germany, just said, we'll do it. We're going to move to Berlin. And I'd always heard that I'd love Berlin and it was a great city. And so we did. We just sold all our stuff and got on a plane. I went 3 months earlier than her because we had to wait for paperwork for our dog and some other stuff that was crazy. But I went to Berlin and.
Okay, so you guys decided on Berlin, Germany, and you said did you have any friends there, or how did that, come
No,
about?
we had nothing. Like we didn't know German. I had taken some German in high school, but it had been forever ago, you know, and I barely passed that class. I could like introduce myself and say I want a coffee, but that was it. But we decided to do it, and one of the things that influenced us there, I mean, we were probably going to do it anyway, but Germany was in the process of changing the laws around citizenship. So you can get citizenship here in 3 years if you put the work in. You have to get basically fluent in German, which is an undertaking to do in 3 years. But then you have German citizenship, and it's the strongest passport in the world. My wife
Wow.
is Vietnamese. Her passport sucks.
Yeah, it's probably
we
the
can't
worst
we
bar-
can't
bottom
travel
of the barrel.
anywhere. And she doesn't want to go to the U.S. because she really, really doesn't like it in the U.S. She doesn't like the car culture. She doesn't like the violence. She thinks things are insanely expensive, which is true.
Yeah. Hey
And
man, but we got our guns.
yeah, lots of fun.
We got freedom.
Yeah, we got all sorts of crazy, of our own crazy stuff.
Okay.
But she just doesn't like the U.S. We
Yeah.
have friends in the U.S. She visits them, but she always wants to leave. So we were like, let's try this whole Germany thing and learn German and see if we can and if we like it, stay and get citizenship and not have visa problems or whatever.
Okay, interesting. So, can you tell me a little bit how that visa and how you're able to get into Germany? Is it like you have to apply to get a job first, then you get sponsored? You know how that works?
Yeah, it's a little weird. So this is a European thing. It's not just a German thing. They have what's called a blue card, and it's basically a skilled worker visa. And I think every country has slightly different laws around what benefits it gives you, but it's a really nice visa. And at least in Germany, the way it works is you get a job offer, and then you take that job offer and you basically submit that with a bunch of other paperwork, and then they give you the visa. So it's not like I wouldn't say they sponsor you, isn't quite the right word, is that they issue you the contract and then you go through all the hoops. And they provide a relocation consultant who helps you do all the paperwork. But you basically submit, hey, I have the job offer, it's past the minimum income requirement, I meet all these other requirements, give me a visa. And Germany goes, rightio, and they give you a visa.
So, do you have to secure a job before you get there, or do you have to get there and then look for a job and then
Well, it depends. So the blue card, you need a job, but you can, if you're American, you can just get on a plane
go
and just
there,
show up.
show
And
up?
you can be a tourist, but you can look for a job. And then they have another visa called the Chancenkarte, which is basically a job seeker visa, which lasts I think 6 months. And you can, unlike other countries, Americans can apply for that in Germany. So you don't have to do it outside the country. Some other countries, you have to come. If you come, you have to leave and then reapply to re-enter. But Americans, you can just show up and do the paperwork and look for a job.
And do you think you stood out a little bit more because of your tech, media, film
Oh,
background?
yeah, absolutely.
You
Like
know,
I said, I'm available for work, and I had recruiters pinging me in like 24 hours.
wow. Yeah, because
I
your
did not
skill
look for
set's
a
kind of,
job. A job looked for me and said, please move to Germany.
I see. So your skill set's in demand. So that worked in your
Yeah.
favor versus
Yeah,
like
yeah.
some other people that might not have that certain skill set. They might not be that educated, might not have that opportunity,
Well,
maybe.
something I'll throw out there is that, most people, if you want to be a digital nomad and travel the world, you have to be in tech, right?
Okay.
Almost always. Well, hear me out. Germany is interesting because they are desperately looking for what I would say more blue collar workers. Like if you're a mechanic, if you're an electrician, things like that. Um, I don't know the full list, but they are like every time I get on the train, they are looking for a ton of people to help operate the train system here. I think the Deutsche Bahn has like 3,000 open positions right now. So after I moved here, I had people pinging me about moving there, and like, if you have those types of skills, it's pretty hard to get a job outside of the U.S. But in Germany, for people who aren't already tech entrepreneurs, there might actually be a lot of options to, with work, move here. I think the biggest barrier is, in many cases, you probably need to know some German. Um, but it's an option for people who want to get out of the U.S. for whatever reason. Um, Germany makes it, especially for Americans, pretty darn easy to move here, even if you're not some tech guy.
Okay. Very nice. Now, I'll give you the soapbox here because I've seen you post a lot on Facebook recently about how much you love Germany. It's a great place, this and that. I see the beautiful photos. So maybe the top 5 things you can share about why you love Germany versus anywhere else.
Well, I'm going to put some nuance on that because I put those posts up there in part for all the people. Like, there's good and bad about Germany. There's stuff I really like, there's stuff that's frustrating. But I think for a lot of people, like I said, who wouldn't have the opportunity to move abroad, like to find a job living outside the US, it presents a pretty unique opportunity. And there's so many people who've pinged me over the years saying, "Oh, how can I move?" But then I say, "Well, if you want to move to Asia, you better be in tech or teach English." And they're like, "Well, I don't want to do any of those." I'm like, it's going to be pretty tough, right, to do that. But here they have a lot more options. And there are some really good things about Germany. I will say that if you're not, I would say it's not the place for someone who wants to be super ambitious and be a tech entrepreneur. You can do it, but the USA is good for that. If you want to bootstrap something, it's actually pretty good because there's a lot of government grants. They're not for a lot of money, but if you're used to starting from zero, it's not bad. It's got even with all the complaints recently, it's got really amazing infrastructure in terms of like public transit. I just spent today in this tiny little town of like 200,000, and it has better public transit than 99% of cities in the U.S.
Oh, I
right?
believe it. Yeah.
And we got there on a train that didn't cost us anything. So for I think it's like 60 euros, so like $65 a month, you can get what's called the Deutsche Pass or whatever. It's an all Germany, all you can use public transit card. It works on trains, it works on trams, it works on buses. With only like the high speed rail are exempt, but you can basically do all your commuting. I go to and from work on rail and tram. We go to other cities on this. And it's $60 a
That's
month.
amazing.
That's it.
So you can live car free. So you don't have like
Yeah,
a car
completely car
payment,
free.
maintenance.
None of that stuff, right? Completely car free. Healthcare here is pretty good, actually, and it comes out of my taxes. But that depends on your income. But it's actually quite solid. I've been pretty happy with it. It's harder again if you never learn to speak German because there's not as many German doctors who speak English. But I found English speaking doctors, and I now, after a year and a half, speak enough German that for anything basic or medium, I can just talk to them in German. It's fine. And that works. It's very safe, all things considered. And it's just, at least Berlin, so I can't really comment on the other cities. Berlin is a cultural center. There are 100 things to do every day and every weekend if you want to do them. Endless parties, endless music. I've been to more concerts in the last year and a half than I think the prior 8 years combined living in Asia. There's always, whatever music you're into, there's always something playing somewhere in the city. I think there's something like 5 to 10 music events a day on average or something crazy. Not to mention any other sorts of art you want to do, painting, drawing, photography, what have you. And then for travel, not just in Germany, but outside of Germany, we've been to Prague, we've been to Copenhagen, I went to Vienna. We're about to take a trip to Warsaw. It's very easy to just travel all around Europe because Germany's right in the middle, either by train or by flight, and or bus, and it's very cheap. So we took I think it was a bus to Prague, and it was like 60 euros each or
Wow.
something. Like, and
Unheard
the
of.
food here is super cheap.
Really?
So people sometimes, yeah, so people sometimes look at the money you make in Europe and they're like, oh my God, that's so low compared to the US. Sometimes it is, but like our entire cost of living is under $3,000 a month for both of us
Wow.
here.
Okay.
Um, if we, when we like look at groceries, I've sent this to friends, like groceries here, I think are like half, a third what they
Is that
cost in the
right? I
US.
wouldn't think.
It's crazy cheap. Like a quart of milk is like a buck, right?
Jeez.
This is
That.
organic milk, like high quality. So like it's a dollar, you know?
Yeah.
Um, it's really, really inexpensive. I think we spend under $500 a month on all of our groceries for two people. I think it's
Wow.
actually more like 250 to 300 because we eat out more, but even if we ate out every single meal, it'd be like 500 bucks.
Wow. That's
So yeah.
shocking because I thought Europe, Germany in general would be expensive in terms of food and drink. So.
No, 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 no. Europe is really cheap,
Hmm.
like crazy cheap. What's expensive is if you want to live in Paris. Berlin is getting expensive. Munich, right? If you want to live in Rome or Barcelona, like the really famous cities. But like we went to one of the smaller German cities here, Dresden, gorgeous
Hmm.
city. Like so that's one of what I post photos of. You can get a 2 or 3 bedroom or 2 or 3 room apartment. They don't call them bedrooms, but 3 rooms, right? 700 square feet or so for 600 bucks, 700
Wow.
bucks a month. And that
Yeah.
includes heat and water,
That's amazing.
right? And you get off, and they have amazing public transit, even in these smaller, like or that would be like a medium-sized city. 60 bucks, right?
Wow.
Done,
Yeah.
right? So for under $1,000 a month, you've got all your bills paid, and the rest is just food and going out.
That's
You know,
crazy. Oh,
so
that's amazing.
it's really affordable. And it's really beautiful, the nature, especially if you're like really physical. This is a country that loves hiking. I've lost like 20 kilograms, so like 40, 50 pounds living
Jeez.
here, because
Wow.
I go from like walking nowhere and riding my motorbike or driving in a car everywhere in Asia to I walk everywhere. And like people are like, oh, you got to get that 10,000 steps a day, and like
Yeah.
10,000 steps a day is just me going to and from work and wandering around. I don't notice 10,000 steps a day. I've had 20,000 step days because I
Yeah.
have it on my phone, right? And I notice that because I'm just physically tired, but I haven't thought, oh, I have to do all this exercise. I just exercise because you can walk everywhere. And you
Hmm.
do. Because
Yeah.
it's so easy. You walk to lunch, you walk to breakfast, you walk to dinner, you walk to have a beer with your friends, you get in and on and off the train, you get home and you're like, oh, I've walked 17,000 steps today, you know?
Yeah.
And
Makes
gone up
sense.
10 flights of stairs or whatever. It's just a very healthy life.
Right. And then what I know of Berlin, it's pretty large and diverse, right? In terms of
Very
lots of, it's very
super super
international,
super diverse.
sophisticated,
I
type
was
of
at a
city.
party last night and I don't think there was more than two people from any given country. And there's like
Wow.
30 people there.
Is that right? That's neat.
Yeah.
That's really neat. All right. So for the time being, it looks like you and your wife are gonna be in Germany.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. We're gonna be here for the next couple years.
All right.
We like it. We're considering buying an apartment in Berlin. We're watching the prices, so the prices have been crashing for various reasons. I mean, like, if people are thinking about moving abroad, like you wanted to have like my top things, Germany is, uh, well, I would say all of Europe is going through a weird and rough patch right now economically. There's still a lot of opportunities here, but they're not the opportunities that people are usually thinking about. Like I said, like if you're into mechanics or electronics or all these things, there's a lot of opportunity. Other things, I would say this is like the wrong place, but it's worth anyone researching. And then if you have kids, this is an amazing place to raise kids because school is free, school after school care is free, university is free, top-notch education, free healthcare, right?
Right.
Tax benefits. Um, it's very nice for that.
Wow. That sounds so amazing.
Yeah. And if you're American and you're like, hey, how am I going to afford school for my kids? If you move to Germany, they still have an American citizenship, so they could come here and get all the way through school completely for free and still have access to the high-paid American job market. I had to pay like 60,000 bucks back for student loans,
Wow.
right? It would be nice to have plus all the interest, plus all the time, right? So if I had $60,000 just cash instead,
Yep.
sitting in the stock market all this time, I think I'd be retired now,
Yeah.
like just from that alone, you know?
Right.
So yeah, it's a good place in that case, in that way,
No,
that
I
case.
totally see it. It seems more holistic. It's really good for the health,
Yeah,
education. It seems
yeah, yeah.
well more balanced, nature, family oriented, public transportation.
Very.
Versus America, it's like, man, you get sick and it's over. Or
Yeah.
like you have to go in debt just to get an education, and then or just to have a job or get anywhere, you got to have
Yep.
a car, which puts you in debt. You can't
Yeah.
save.
The only real downside here, I mean, there's two big downsides. One is if you're going to be here long term, you definitely want to learn German.
Okay.
And some people have said that's hard. I would say it's actually pretty easy as a language. Like it's hard at the beginning, but every language is. But I think it's harder at the beginning than say
Yeah.
Spanish.
Sure.
But my wife's not a native English speaker, and she is conversationally competent in 6 months.
Wow.
And they will provide classes to you for free.
Wow.
They have this thing called the Volkshochschule, and you show up, and they will teach you German
Oh,
for free.
that's
Like
amazing.
you have to jump through a bunch of hoops that take a few months to do all the paperwork, and then they'll say, "Yep, here you go," and then you just attend the class for a couple months. But they'll teach you German,
That's incredible.
and then you're good to go. And then if you want to keep going, you can. The classes, if you pay for them, are quite cheap. So, no biggie. Okay. So the other thing about Germany that I think is maybe a bad fit for some people, and I would say this is true of pretty much everywhere on earth that isn't the U.S., is if you're trying to be a tech entrepreneur and raise millions of dollars of funds to launch your tech whatever. You can raise money around the world, but if you're not German, if you're American or whatever, I mean, America is the best place on earth to do this
I see.
type of stuff. Maybe China is number two, if you're willing to deal with China. Everywhere else is like a distant third. Now, Berlin, in terms of inside of Europe, is one of the top startup hotspots, and you can raise money here. It is very possible. And especially if you're doing stuff like climate tech and things that the Europeans love, chances are someone will give you some money, but it won't be as much and it won't be as aggressive. On the other hand, like with my wife and I having a coffee shop, I see small businesses like that, restaurants and whatever, that are really good at what they do, making tons of money here. Um, German, at least in Berlin, the German culinary scene is pretty weak. They're not really a society like about like high quality customer service. It's just not a German thing. And so I see lots of restaurants that open here and just do a really good job and are making ungodly sums of money. You know, if you're an incredibly good baker, you can come here and you can sell like artisanal donuts for like $5 a donut. Like the profit margins on that are like tech. Like it's like 90% profit, right?
Jeez.
Like why do you need a tech company when you can just make donuts? Why make it so hard? So there's a lot of opportunities here, and of course, if anyone wants to talk to me about moving here, I'm happy to help them. Um, but it is like it's not for everybody. I think there's a
Sure.
lot of people who are here that I meet who are really frustrated and go home because it's something you'd have to just check out to see if it's a fit.
Yeah.
The first 6 months here were rough. There's a lot of bureaucracy. There's a lot of paperwork. Did not know German. So you're dealing with German paperwork and German system you do not understand. When you understand the system, it kind of starts to make sense, but like you're not going to. So the first 6 months were really tough. The next 6 months were better, but still tough. The last 6 months have actually been pretty good because we get it now, right? So people, if they want to do the whole seeing the world thing, it's a phenomenal place to go to. You just got to kind of steel your mind that you're going to spend a year dealing with all the stuff and probably learning some German and still having a great time. Like I said, the concerts, the parties, the things to do are all fantastic. But it's not all fun and games. And I've met
Sure.
so many people who've come here, they have a great time, they don't handle any of the paperwork, and then their life becomes hell because they have visa problems and living problems and so because they didn't do the stuff you need to do, you know?
Wow, that's great. That's fascinating. What a story. From North Carolina to Asia, Vietnam, getting married, running a small business, to surviving COVID, to now living in Germany.
Yeah,
That's great,
and
Brenn. So, any last
maybe after
words?
you get,
Any last
yeah,
words or
I
things
mean,
you want to leave us with?
Go do bold things. I moved across the world because I met my wife, but I was already planning to leave. My biggest regret in life is I didn't leave 10 years earlier
Wow.
and go see the world.
Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was never really happy in the US. If you're like saying, I love the US, stay the US. If you've been like, man, I don't really like living in the US, I haven't been really happy the last couple of years, get out now.
Yeah.
As fast as you can, get out. Just go see the world. Even if you come back, you'll have more appreciation of what you left behind. Because there's some great things about the US, but you don't appreciate them until you've left the US.
Yeah.
And
That's
you
so
might come
true.
back and be happier anyway,
Right.
you know.
I love it. Great advice. I think the same way, Bren. I really appreciate reconnecting with you and hearing your story, buddy.